Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Arnis Luks here at the Freedom Forum, and I'd like to welcome my guest from Canada, Yves Potvin. Welcome, Yves. No worries.
Well, good morning.
Good morning. That's it. Now, Yves, on the title here, I've actually got the words "The Pilgrims of St Michael," and I'm just going to cut across to their website just to put some information before our guests. Now, the Michael Journal is a product of the Pilgrims of St. Michael, and they're located in Canada. And they have a history of their foundation, and they have, if you like, full time pilgrims and part time pilgrims. And they also, as I said, regularly produce the Michael Journal. And the website is well worth a look. It'll help you understand what they're on about. But more importantly, we've got Eves here to give us a heads up about the pilgrims. Eves.
Yes. So I've been with the Pilgrims of St. Michael for since I was born.
Yeah, beautiful.
So I'm in the upper. I'm getting elderly, so I've been with them a long time. I haven't always do the what we call the apostolate work that we do.
Hmm.
But from time to time, in the last year or two, I've been more faithful to the movement, and I've kept on working on different projects, meetings,
Hmm.
going to conferences, and so on and so forth.
Hmm.
So
Yep.
basically, it's that's the history of it is if you want to hear the history of it.
I do actually. I'd like to not only hear the history, Eves, but also the. I understand that the pilgrims are around all over the place, and so if they're around the world, and I believe they are, just some of the locations and what other main tasks that they set themselves.
Well, in we have okay. Let's start with Rougemont, Quebec. Of course, that's where our center, like the mother house, is.
Hmm.
Then we go to the United States,
Hmm.
where a gentleman by the name of Yves Jacques. My
Hmm.
name is Potvin. His name is Jacques,
Hmm.
but Yves is the same name as mine,
Hmm.
and he's bilingual. A
Hmm.
very nice gentleman. He's been with the movement for 45 years,
Hmm.
and he runs the that portion of United States in the northeastern part of United States,
Hmm.
and does a very good job there.
Hmm.
Him and his wife both write articles in the Michael Journal in English.
Okay. Yeah.
So, and then we go on to Poland,
Hmm.
where we've been there for quite a few years.
Hmm.
Janusz Lewinsky is the pilgrim there,
Hmm.
and he takes care of all of Poland
Hmm.
and surrounding countries.
Hmm.
Then we've just opened up since 2006. We've opened up Africa,
Hmm.
huge.
Hmm.
We've been doing work with the church in Africa.
Yeah.
The clergy is more open to our to social credit, to
Okay.
economic democracy.
Yeah.
So we're able to go right into the universities and the
Hmm.
colleges, and mostly in the French countries, but we've just lately started in Nigeria.
Okay. So my take on what you've said is that the Pilgrims of St Michael are very strongly working within information and imparting that information to different communities around the world. Is it just information, or are they actually doing other things?
Well, we put you'd almost have to go back to Louis Evin in
Hmm.
1934,
Hmm.
1939 when he started the movement,
Hmm.
and they were looking for a way of we needed a press
Hmm.
or a magazine
Hmm.
that sent the information of truth
Hmm.
throughout the world.
Okay.
So that was his main concern at the time, is to come out with a magazine,
Hmm.
which was in a newspaper style in those days,
Yeah.
and then he was able to put all kinds of truth, which you cannot see in the media.
Hmm.
Obviously, we would block from that. We have articles that are amazing,
Hmm.
but the newspaper just don't want to send that from. Well, you know about the information
Of course,
network,
the mainstream media certainly know about that. Yeah, yeah.
but we've talked about things like income tax. Being unconstitutional in every country, any
Hmm.
taxes really,
Hmm.
and we've talked about many things that we wrote about. Right now, we have an editor at Rougemont, Quebec. His name is Alain Pilote. He's
Hmm.
also bilingual, but he does all the research and edits the magazines. He
Okay.
does a fantastic job.
Hmm.
He's also a teacher in our
Hmm.
sessions on the 10 lessons of social credit,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
we used to have about 2 or 3 times a year, but now we're down to one.
yeah.
We'll have one this year in September.
Hmm. Is that a something that could be accessed remotely, like through the internet or
Yes,
anything?
we have. Yes, we can probably. As a matter of fact, you can access yourself to the sessions. I believe they still have that.
Hmm.
There's a young man that comes and helps us with the filming of the sessions.
Hmm.
It's not professionally done, but it's live.
Hmm.
So a lot of the things have to be edited, I guess. But we don't have that chance unless
Hmm.
we had your program. Maybe that could be something to look at.
It might be something to look at. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Yes.
the thing is that this is a platform. To me, what it does is it gives you essentially a TV studio in your own home, and I think that's very powerful.
Yeah.
Fast enough internet, and you can access all these things. So it is quite important. But getting back to the Pilgrims of St Michael. So okay, they're talking about taxation. And they're talking about really what it is to me, it appears to be is an education movement. Would I be right in saying that?
Well, the education, if I know what you mean, is the learning of the social credit. We
Hmm.
do it according to the social doctrine of the church. So that's part. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, hey, that to me is beautiful because I think that's most important to substantiate that the teachings of social credit you're actually aligning with the social doctrine emanating from the seat, right?
Yes.
From the Pope, the seat of Peter. And I think that's really, really important that if we're talking about something that's consistent with Christian philosophy and Christian, what would you call it? Not only theology, but also the methods of deeply learning the profundity that's within the social doctrine of the church. I think
Yeah.
it's wonderful. Yes. Mm.
Well, on that subject, when you go onto our website, you can notice under articles and under social credit,
Hmm.
uh, it has a saying there. Christianity will only survive if the C.H. Douglas's idea is introduced or
Yeah.
is in effect. Otherwise, Christianity won't survive
Hmm.
because we'll be taken over by other groups
Hmm.
that want to rule the world, kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. And the way I understand the Christian doctrine, it's about each individual essentially ruling themselves. It's about the sanctity of the individual, that it's the individual that is eternal. It is the individual who can actually through pursuit of God come into the very presence of God, not the state, not the power of the state, not the bureaucracy, not any other if you like mechanism, but rather it's actually the spirit itself of the individual that is most profound. I'm just going to cut across to the journal. We'll lose your audio just for a sec there, Eves. So we've got here the journal. It's under social credit, so that's under articles and social credit, and there are some of the articles that are there, and no doubt most wonderful reading, and I find it fascinating because I've been a student of social credit, Christianity, and social credit since I was a young lad, and it's only really in the last couple of years that it's become quite vivid. And it's only through research, it's only through reading, studying,
Yes.
and renewing your mind, if you like, that you start to fathom the ramifications of what this Christian gospel is all about. I think it's wonderful. Eves.
Yes.
Hmm.
That's good. We think the same, obviously. But one thing about the social doctrine of the church, a lot of people don't know
Mhm.
that the encyclicals of the popes
Mhm.
for the last two, three, 400 years
Mhm.
have written uh, encyclicals to denounce the fraudulent banking system,
Mhm.
and the popes have openly said this is what's wrong with it. So
Mhm.
the job of the lay people is to change that.
Yeah.
So that's our job, to really educate the people and that's the only way we're going to be able to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually watched a video just this evening. It's only hot off the press, and it was done by a Queenslander being interviewed, and he talked about the if you like advanced control robotics automation, the power of automation and robotics to actually displace people from the workforce, so that the abundance that's there is being produced by less and less people. And the fact is that that abundance is part of the cultural inheritance of each person in the community, and it's not the right that's been confiscated by these central banks. That of course the banks are over and above government, over and above politicians, over and above political parties, over and above mainstream media, and so it's really all of these barriers are put in place before you can actually even consider the power of the banks, and you've got all these, if you like, agents working to suppress thought, including in the seats of the universities and, dare I say it, in the seminaries. Eves.
Yes, it's sad, but I mean, this is the way the world goes. So,
Mhm.
but
Mm.
we have to remember that I always, in my conferences, I always mention the social credit. What is social credit? Yeah,
Mhm.
it's been around for 100 years
Mhm.
through C.H. Douglas's writings and all that.
Mhm.
But really, social credit is not. It's as old as the world. It's the natural law of
Mhm.
things,
Mhm.
basically. So
Mm.
we got to keep in mind that yeah, we've written a lot of articles about social credit, the economic democracy, and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
But it's as old as the world. I
Mhm.
always said that Jesus Christ
Mhm.
was the first social creditor
That's right.
because
That's right. And the thing is that, as I understand the social credit in community, it's the faithful dealings. It's the faithful dealings between people. Mutual love and cooperation, the faithful dealings. That's what social credit means. And I find it fascinating that if you like, the powers that be are so frightened of the potential of social credit, of people dealing faithfully with each other, that the Chinese have now seized on the name, the Chinese social credit, which essentially is exactly a social discredit, which is where the police state is actually monitoring every individual, instead
yes,
of instead of each individual receiving his, if you like, his inheritance, his cultural inheritance that's there. The cultural inheritance, when the machines, the automation, the robots are producing all, why shouldn't each individual have their basic rights, their basic share, which should be sufficient to feed them, to clothe them, and to put them into their own home? Why shouldn't they have that basic right, their inheritance, which belongs to each person? But
yeah,
rather, the banks confiscate it through industry, and we've just recently seen it where this huge mine, a coal reserve, was essentially handed over to a overseas body to exploit, and the community will derive no benefit whatsoever from something that
exploiting.
belongs in their own community. It's theirs, and it's being, if you like, handed over through the power of the banks. And this is so wrong. The cultural inheritance exploited by the banks for their own benefit, rather than
Yeah,
being distributed the reverse of taxation, because if you like, this taxation is confiscation, whereas the national dividend is a payment in order to use that purchasing power to buy what industry makes, or if
Yes.
you like, to have their share of that reserve that's in the community, that cultural inheritance that's in the community. So it's a completely different way of thinking. Eves.
Yeah, it's I there's no need to agree with you. I mean, it's automatically agreeable.
Mhm.
Uh, what I've found is I'm a different medicine every day.
Mhm.
My medicine that I take is natural. For example, so I look at the pharmacies, the doctors, and the income tax, for example. All these things wrapped up together, they're all built up to be a kind of a phony industry, but
Mhm.
yet they are surviving very well,
Mhm.
including the banks.
Mhm.
But they are. I mean, if you if you look at the way that I'm trying to say something here, but I just can't connect it. Uh, the lie that they've been passing by us, the deception that
Mhm. Mhm.
we experience,
Yeah.
is amazing. People cannot understand. You mentioned about the income tax.
Mhm.
Whoa, it was only a war measure and all that, but that's
Mhm.
it. That's as far as they go. Well,
Mhm.
why are we paying for it? The rule is the federal government should not charge us income tax. Well, why do we accept that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Why don't we scream? Why don't we shout?
Yeah, yeah. Because and the thing is that if you like, the education or indoctrination starts at such a young age. I found it fascinating when I started to think about arithmetic, mathematics, if you like, as a young lad. And as a student in school in the second and third grade, you were taught to add up and then do your times tables. But when you were first taught to add up, they didn't get you to go to an apple tree and pick an apple off the tree. What they did was they presented you with an image of an apple and then a bag and a shopkeeper scenario where you wanted to get one or two apples and you had to exchange it for some coin. And so, in actual fact, instead of recognizing that the apple is part of the natural world, and if you happen to plant a seed and the tree grows, you go and harvest the apple, it costs you nothing. It costs you nothing but effort. And there it is. God's bounty comes from the soil, comes from the air we breathe, the sun, and the rain. All of these things are free gifts from God. And the apple is there as free. And yet the young child is indoctrinated to relate it to coin, to money. And when in actual fact, coin is simply a method of counting. One and one make two. But it doesn't make two apples doesn't make a dollar or anything like that. Two apples, go to your tree, one and one apple makes two. Pick it from the tree and count it, but not for the dollar. This is where you confuse the abstract, and the abstract nowadays, of course, all banking is abstract. It's all on computer blips. It doesn't take the form of notes and coins. Less than 5%, perhaps less than 2% is notes and coins. So it's entirely abstract. It's a method of counting. And yet we place intrinsic value on on money as coinage, as blips on a computer, as if it was real. And it's not. It's entirely man-made. And if it's man-made and the world is in debt, then the world can get out of debt simply by adjusting this man-made system. Eves.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I've just that reminds me of an article we put in one of our magazine. It
Mhm.
was Pope Francis a couple of years ago
Mhm.
who wrote the article on only until the last river is gone, the last tree cut, and the last fish available. Only then will we know that we don't eat money. Money is not what we eat.
No,
Is the natural products is what we eat. So
that's right.
yes,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
barter system is a good system, but
Mhm.
I mean we know about the barter system.
Mhm.
But if I have 50,000 potatoes and I want to exchange it for a fish or a house or something like this, it'd
Mhm.
be pretty hard.
Mm,
So the money system was invented. It was a smart system.
mm,
The money system is a good system,
mm.
but if you take advantage of it, it can be a bad system.
Exploitive, that's right. It's predatory and exploitive, and that really is the issue. That the assets of not only individuals are, if you like, seized on by the banks, but also entire nations. Debt for equity swaps and things like that. You look at Greece, Ireland, Portugal, Italy, they're losing absolutely everything. And my own nation, Australia, is jumping over itself to hand over things which are being essentially handed to the foreign powers just simply to alleviate the debt burden. When in actual fact, if the banking system, the financial system was fair and equitable, the debts wouldn't be there in the first place. In the
That's right.
natural world, there's no such thing as debt. There's only an abundance. You know, and the thing is, even if you like the disconnect of people living in high rises between the those that live on property where they can grow their own fruit and veg, there is a disconnect with the world. It's quite deliberate and, in my view, malevolent with this whole thing. Yeah.
Yes, it's a system that has got to be changed. Either that, or they're going to change themselves, or we're going to have to do something. They're going to do something, or we're going to have to do something,
Mm,
because they're not going to lay down and increase the debt until it's ridiculous. I mean, our money is just it is not worth anything.
hmm
So if I have $1,000 in my wallet. Never. I have maybe $100 in my wallet,
hmm
but it's gone in a day. It's gone in 2 days. Like
That,
there's not never enough money in my wallet
that's right.
to to keep going.
Yeah. That in itself is a demonstration, a practical realization that there is if you like, a deliberate deficiency of the issuing of sufficient spending power by the banks and part of policy. I think we need to really start coming to grips with the our relationship with our government and policy. And the fact is that the government, as part of policy, could certainly issue sufficiency. Every time there's a war, you look at the release of new credits. Industry winds up, goes off the clock to produce armaments and military equipment and if you like, long-term storage foodstuffs and things like that. Industry goes to blitz to produce all these things. So it's not as if they can't be done, but it's just under the particular circumstances. Why do we need a war to have an abundance? We should be able to have an abundance in peacetime. We should be able to produce things and have a system where we're actually capable of consuming them. But the distribution system is lacking. The distribution system is the financial system. It's yeah, interesting because no doubt the work of the pilgrims, it's ongoing and it's most encouraging to hear of the pilgrims, Yves. And I'd actually really enjoyed today, really enjoyed the forum, and I'd like to have you back again soon if that's okay with you.
Thank you very much. I would appreciate it.
No worries. Excellent. Well, this is Arnis Luks at the Freedom Forum, and I have Yves Potvin from Canada representing the Pilgrims of St Michael. Thank you very much, Yves. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. My pleasure.